The first sound was the clock. A steady tick from the far wall, louder than the murmurs in the doctor's waiting room, louder than the coughs and the shuffle of magazines. Antonia Brooks sat with her purse clutched in both hands, staring at the linoleum floor as if answers might appear in the cracks. Her phone buzzed. A familiar name lit up the screen. Angela. Her only daughter. Antonia pressed accept, expecting the usual quick check-in. Instead, her daughter's voice cut through the line like a blade. "Mom, I don't have time to explain. We sold the beach house and the truck. Edward found buyers. We needed the money for Europe. We leave tomorrow." Silence. Not even the courtesy of waiting for a reply. The call ended before Antonia could form a single word. The purse slid from her lap to the floor. Around her, strangers kept coughing, flipping pages, filling the air with ordinary life, but Antonia sat frozen. 45 years of raising a child, 45 years of giving every ounce of herself, gone, discarded in a voice as cold as winter glass. Her throat tightened, but no tears came. Not this time. She inhaled deeply, and to her surprise, she smiled. A small, sharp smile no one else noticed. Because her daughter had overlooked one simple fact, Antonia was not the helpless old woman she appeared to be. The doctor's assistant called her name. She rose slowly, smoothed her skirt, and walked into the white hallway, her mind not on her health but on a memory. 6 months earlier, at breakfast, her husband Robert had poured her coffee, kissed her forehead, and died before the toast cooled on the table. The grief had swallowed her whole. Angela had stepped in then, offering help, offering comfort, guiding her through forms and signatures. Antonia had thought it was love. Now she saw the truth. But Robert had left her something more than memories. Something she had pushed to the back of a dresser drawer in the fog of morning. A sealed envelope, pressed into her hands 3 days before his heart gave out. Antonia left the clinic an hour later with a clean bill of health and a heart that beat with something new. Not sorrow. Not rage. Determination. Her daughter thought she had stolen everything. She had no idea what waited in that drawer. The bus hissed as it pulled away from the curb, leaving Antonia at the corner of her quiet street. Dusk was settling in, painting the houses gold and gray, shadows stretching long across cracked sidewalks. She walked slowly toward her home, a widow's pace, deliberate and measured. From the outside, she looked like any other woman her age, tired, fragile, invisible. Inside, something else had awakened. The house greeted her with silence. The photographs on the hallway wall watched as she passed, Angela in pigtails at 5, Angela in her prom dress at 17, Angela's wedding day when she looked almost too young to promise forever. Antonia touched none of them. She went straight to her bedroom, to the dresser where the envelope lay hidden beneath folded scarves. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. The weight of the paper felt heavier than it had months ago, as if it had absorbed Robert's absence. His handwriting on the front, steady, careful, brought the first real sting of tears since the phone call. She held it against her chest before sliding a finger under the flap. The contents spilled onto the bed. Documents, deeds, certificates she barely understood. And a letter, written in Robert's hand. "My love, if you are reading this, I am gone. I didn't tell you everything while I lived, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to shield you from worry. Every sacrifice we made, every penny we saved, I invested quietly. There is more than you know. Much more. It is all yours now. Guard it, and guard yourself. Especially from Angela. She must never know until the time is right." Her breath caught. The letter blurred behind her tears. Angela. Even in his last days, Robert had foreseen their daughter's weakness. A sound drifted from the kitchen, the creak of the old floorboards. For a heartbeat, Antonia thought Robert had come back to her. But it was only the house, settling into night. She gathered the papers carefully, tucking them back into their envelope. Then she poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the kitchen window. Outside, the world was ordinary, neighbors walking dogs, a boy pedaling home on a bike. Inside, her life had shifted. Angela believed she had stripped her bare. But Antonia now held the truth in her hands. And with it, the power to decide how her daughter would learn the cost of betrayal. The letter burned in Antonia's thoughts for days. She hid the envelope beneath the loose floorboard under her bed, as if Angela might somehow appear at the door and sniff out its secrets. Each morning she played her role flawlessly, the quiet widow who shuffled to the market, who answered polite condolences with a tired smile. But behind her eyes, a storm gathered. It broke with another phone call. This time Angela's voice wasn't cold. It was frayed, brittle, a string about to snap. "Mom. Edward's gone." A pause, ragged breathing. "He left me here. With nothing. The business was a lie. He took what was left of the money and disappeared." For a long moment, Antonia said nothing. She stared at the lace curtains fluttering in her kitchen window, the sunlight broken into shards across the table. "Where are you, Angela?" she asked softly. "In Paris. Alone. I don't even have money for the flight back. I don't know what to do." Antonia closed her eyes. The mother in her wanted to say, "Come home, darling. I'll fix this." But Robert's words pressed against her chest, "Guard yourself. She must never know until the time is right." "Angela," she said carefully, "you'll find a way. You always do." Her daughter began to cry on the other end. Real, unrestrained sobs that Antonia hadn't heard since Angela was a child scraped knees and came running for comfort. The sound pierced her, tore at the walls she was trying so hard to build. "I just want to come home," Angela whispered. When the call ended, Antonia sat in the stillness, torn open. She could buy Angela a first-class ticket home without blinking. She could clear every debt Edward had left behind. She could lift her daughter from despair with one phone call to Mr. Peterson, Robert's old lawyer. But she didn't. Not yet. That night, unable to sleep, she stood before the mirror. For the first time in months, she studied her own reflection, the sharpness of her jaw, the streak of silver in her hair. She saw not a victim, but a woman holding the fate of her family in her hands. The twist was not Angela's collapse. It was Antonia's choice. She would help her daughter, but on her own terms. No rescue without reckoning. The game, she realized, had truly begun. Rain streaked the windows the night Angela returned. A cab stopped at the curb, headlights flashing against wet pavement, and Antonia watched from behind the curtains as her daughter stepped out with a single battered suitcase. No expensive luggage now, no Edward at her side. Just a thin coat, damp hair plastered to her face, and eyes that looked far older than her years. When Antonia opened the door, Angela faltered, as if unsure she would be welcomed. "Mom," she whispered, voice cracked from the long flight and longer silence between them. "Come in before you drown," Antonia said, stepping aside. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from 2 cups of tea. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Finally, Angela spoke. "I made a mistake. 100 mistakes. Edward, he lied about everything. I sold your house. I sold Dad's truck. I thought I was building a future, but all I did was destroy the past. And when he left me," her voice broke, tears spilling, "I realized I had nothing. No money. No husband. No one. Except you." The words carved into Antonia. She wanted to reach across the table, to cradle her daughter's face as she had when she was small. But she stayed still, her hands wrapped tight around her mug. "You treated me like I was disposable," Antonia said quietly. "Do you know what that felt like?" Angela nodded, trembling. "I know now. I felt it too. He threw me away like I was nothing. And I deserved it. I became what I swore I'd never be. Just like him, selfish." The rain hammered harder against the windows. Angela's shoulders shook as she whispered, "I don't want money, Mom. I just need a place to sleep. A chance to try again. Antonia studied her, searching for truth. Was this desperation, or the beginning of humility? Behind her ribs, her heart ached with the weight of Robert's letter. Guard yourself. She must never know until the time is right. At last, Antonia reached out, resting her hand over Angela's. This house is still your home. But understand, things cannot go back to the way they were. Angela's tears slowed. For the first time in months, she nodded with real sincerity. And in that moment, Antonia knew, the reckoning was close. The past had returned to her doorstep, and soon the truth would have to rise with it. The lawyer's office smelled of old leather and polished wood, the kind of place where truth carried weight. Antonia sat beside her daughter at the long oak table, her posture regal, her hands folded neatly. Across from them, Mr. Harper, the lawyer Robert had trusted, slid a heavy folder across the surface. Angela hesitated before opening it. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the documents inside. Her face paled. This says, she swallowed hard. It says Edward forged my signature. That I was never legally responsible for those loans. That's correct, Mr. Harper said. The evidence is irrefutable. The debts will be erased. You are free. Angela pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling. Relief should have flooded the room, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. She turned to her mother, whispering, "Who paid for all this? Lawyers don't work for free." Antonia's heart pounded. This was the moment Robert had prepared her for. She drew a breath and nodded to Mr. Harper. He slid a second folder across the table. Angela opened it. Property deeds. Bank statements. Investment papers. The kind of wealth she had never imagined. Her eyes darted to her mother. This is yours? Yes, Antonia said softly. Your father built it quietly over decades. He left it all to me. I have known since the day you left for Europe. Angela's chair scraped the floor as she pushed back. Her face crumpled with confusion, with betrayal. You let me suffer. You watched me beg. You saw me, scrubbing offices at night, pawning my wedding ring, and you said nothing? Antonia met her daughter's eyes. Because you had to learn. Money wouldn't have saved you. It would have buried you deeper in your blindness. Angela shook her head, tears falling fast. You punished me. No, Antonia said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. I gave you what Edward never could. The truth. You treated me as if I were disposable. You sold the pieces of our life without looking back. I had to let you feel what it means to lose, so you would understand what it means to keep. The room trembled with silence. Angela pressed her hands flat against the table, tears dripping onto the polished wood. And for the first time, she whispered words Antonia had longed to hear, Mom. I was wrong. The days that followed unfolded quietly, like dawn after a storm. Angela moved back into her childhood room, the walls still painted the pale blue she had once begged for as a teenager. At first, she carried herself like a guest, apologetic, careful, afraid to disturb the air. But slowly, the house softened around her, and so did Antonia. One evening, they sat together on the porch, the ocean murmuring faintly in the distance. The air smelled of salt and rain-soaked earth. Antonia poured 2 glasses of wine, the bottle Robert had saved for a celebration that matters. She raised hers toward the night sky. To your father, she said. Angela's glass trembled in her hand. He would be ashamed of me. No, Antonia answered, firm as stone. He would be proud. Not of the mistakes, but of the woman they forced you to become. Angela's eyes brimmed. I don't deserve this second chance. Antonia touched her daughter's hand, her voice lowering to a whisper. None of us deserve grace. That's why it matters when it's given. They drank in silence. For the first time in months, laughter slipped between them, small at first, then freer, carried on the night air like something released. Weeks later, Angela found work not as a cleaner, but at a local shelter, helping women claw their way back from abandonment and loss. She came home late, tired but glowing, speaking of strangers whose stories mirrored her own. Each night, Antonia listened, storing every word like a keepsake. One Sunday, Angela stood on the porch, watching gulls wheel above the surf. "Mom," she said, "I want us to open the beach house. Not just for us, for women who need refuge, the way I did. I want to fill it with voices, not silence." Antonia studied her daughter's face, and for the first time in years, saw no trace of entitlement, only strength. She thought of Robert, of the letter in his steady hand, of the warning he had left her, "Guard yourself. She must never know until the time is right." Now, at last, it was right. She squeezed Angela's hand. "Then let's open the doors." The waves crashed against the shore, steady, eternal, as if sealing a promise between past and future. And in that moment, Antonia knew, she had not lost her daughter. She had found her anew.